Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
There's so many people that deal with chronic stress on a regular basis that can actually lead to what we coin as being tired and wired all at the same time, which for anyone who has ever experienced this and having extreme stress, whether emotional, physical, and the long-term implications for that can be very challenging. So today I want to talk about being tired and wired and what you can be doing and really trying to get to the root cause of that and what we can do to try to mitigate those causes. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH, and many people have heard of the term adrenal fatigue or adrenal stress. Now, oftentimes people say, well, that's not an actual real diagnosis, but we certainly know that something like chronic fatigue syndrome is a real diagnosis. And we also recognize that when we're looking at chronic fatigue syndrome, this is estimated to impact well over 2.5 million Americans, which may seem like a relatively low number, but remember, these are people who have been told by a physician that they have chronic fatigue. This doesn't account for all of the other people who go about their days and feel tired and wired, meaning that you just have no energy, but you also don't have the capacity to really be able to fully unwind. And this can be problematic because it can lower our immune system. We certainly can lose focus, have an inability to just carry out daily tasks efficiently. And this is a big issue for so many people. Now, looking at chronic fatigue syndrome, for example, we know that there's increasing evidence that supports the role of a genetic susceptibility, and there oftentimes can be a family history. So once again, we have to look at, are genes playing a role, or is it environmental? Is it dealing with our metabolism? Is there a thyroid connection? There is certainly a strong connection with chronic fatigue syndrome post-infection, so whether viral or bacterial. There has been that component to which many researchers have looked at. But when people continuously have this, they feel wired, but they also feel tired, we have to look at cortisol, and we have to look at what's going on within the adrenal glands, because we understand that cortisol and the HPA axis, when we're looking at the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, if one section of the HPA axis is not working right, that can start to impact other aspects. So looking at cortisol and understanding that this is our primary stress hormone. Now, we also have DHEA, and we also recognize that DHEA plays a role in our body's ability to manage stress. So we can look at these two different levels, and we can start to draw some connections. Oftentimes when people have high cortisol levels, over time, this starts to impact the DHEA levels, and it starts to actually push DHEA levels down. Now, we know that we need to have DHEA to maintain and support our immune system. So now you can start to see that connection there. We also recognize that when people have elevated cortisol levels, this can start to impact insulin levels. So all of these different hormones can start to have this negative effect on each other. And then we can look at how the adrenals can affect your thyroid and can impact your metabolic rate. So if we have insulin issues, maybe we're always kind of feeling hungry, yet we're always tired, and then we're having problems with sleeping because then we have to look at the entire HPA axis. It is got to be a horrible thing. I am not one who can speak upon experience of having chronic fatigue syndrome or adrenal stress or adrenal fatigue, but I certainly have worked with many people who experience this, and they just, describe it as like, I just feel burned out and I don't want to do anything, but yet I just can't seem to relax in the same sense. And when you have prolonged stress, like I said, and it can be coming from emotional stress, it can be coming from physiological stress, from something has gone awry in the body when we look at infections, things along that line. But we know that this can lead to significant levels of anxiety, depression. We can certainly look at issues with high blood pressure. We can look at GI issues. Many people who have the symptoms that fall into the category for chronic fatigue oftentimes will have GI issues along with those issues with, insomnia or sleep disturbances, meaning that they're not getting adequate sleep throughout the night. And this all gets tied back to that HPA axis dysfunction. And it's initially brought on by that increase in cortisol level and neurotransmitter imbalances. So all of these certainly need to be addressed. And we need to find out that the main root cause. Do you recognize that you have a high amount of stress? And are you having a hard time managing that? Do you need to find ways to incorporate things like, meditation or yoga, ways for you to be able to decompress from your day? Can we add in adrenal adaptogenic herbs, things such as ashwagandha, rhodiola, for example, that can help to mitigate that negative impact of what cortisol is doing to our body? If we're having problems with our blood sugar and metabolic dysregulation that's occurring, so if we have high insulin, which is then causing us to say, oh, we want to eat, we have to look at the diet. We have to make sure that you're having meals spaced out at the right time with the right foods. Looking at the potential for a subclinical hypothyroid that could be driving or exacerbating this. And obviously, if we have a chronic disease state, we have to always look at that as well, because we know that chronic inflammation is just going to make things worse. So chronic inflammation is also a trigger for cortisol release. So this is why I said physiological. So maybe you're like, I don't really have that much stress. I'm not arguing with people at work. I'm not arguing with people in my family. I generally feel like I get along with most people, but I still am having these issues. But then we look deeper into it and it's like, well, I am a diabetic and I do have elevated cholesterol. I am on high blood pressure medication. Okay, so we have to look at that chronic inflammation. All of these different things that has to be a multimodal approach for people who are dealing with this problem of feeling tired and wired. So we have to incorporate in regular exercise, even though you're like, oh gosh, I can't even bear the idea of trying to go out and exercise. I'm so exhausted. I am so tired. But we have to push through that. And we have to get our metabolic rate, get that blood pumping, get that oxygenation and blood flow out to the tissues. We have to get onto a regular sleep pattern. Oftentimes when people feel tired and wired, they may sit on their couch till, the wee hours of the morning, staring at the TV, flipping through, trying to find something, to dull their mind. Maybe your mind is racing, thinking about things that you didn't accomplish today that you now have to do tomorrow. So having good sleep hygiene is very important. Being in a dark room, not having your electronic devices running, your television, your iPad, your phone, anything that's emitting that blue light. All of these different things matter. Because we know that chronic fatigue syndrome and its debilitating impact that it can have, like I said, impairing just basic daily living activities, are things that we have to be aware of. We have to consider. And we have to understand, how do we deal with this? How do we fight off this stress? How do we support our adrenals? Because all of these things, at the end of the day, are going to accelerate the aging process. And we certainly don't need to be doing that. Now, there are other problems that can arise within your adrenal glands, such as Addison's disease and Cushing's syndrome. Those are going to be certainly more rare than when we're looking at chronic fatigue, where your adrenal glands are just stressed out. So we have to look at what the adrenals themselves are doing. And the adrenal gland is producing different hormones that regulate all of these different bodily functions. So we're looking at cortisol, so that's a glucocorticoid. We're looking at aldosterone. We're looking at epinephrine. We're looking at DHEA. These are the primary hormones to which the adrenal gland secretes out. If we have an issue with any of these, like say, for example, we are secreting too much epinephrine, well, what can that do? That can drive up heart rate, which can make someone feel anxious. If we have DHEA not being secreted at adequate amounts, now this can affect your sex hormones. Because remember, DHEA not only is an adrenal hormone, but it also is that precursor hormone for the manufacturing of testosterone and estrogen. So it can even throw off your menstrual cycles in women. This can certainly impact sex drive in both men and women. Aldosterone, which we know is very important for maintaining proper fluid balance in the body. So once again, we can look along that pathway of high blood pressure. So all of these different things driving from the adrenals, and that's just isolating the adrenal gland. That's not looking at the full HPA axis and understanding how the adrenal can then affect other hormone systems, which is why many times people have this problem when it comes to getting adequate sleep. So when we look at things to support, we can clearly look at things like melatonin. We can look at calcium and vitamin D. We can look at the utilization of the adrenal adaptogenic herbs. So we actually have a formulation, Adrenal Serine, which is an amazing blend of nutrients to support stressed out adrenal glands. And what the Adrenal Serine contains is an adrenal glandular, which is really very unique. And one of the things with the adrenals is it's not just a one-pronged approach. Remember, we're dealing with all of these different hormones. And we know that the primary one that's creating all of this havoc is cortisol. But by having this adrenal glandular, it allows the adrenal glands to get a comprehensive blend to support proper release and signaling of these hormones. It contains phosphatidylserine. Oftentimes we talk about phosphatidylserine in the setting of brain health, because we know phosphatidylserine plays a role with protecting our neurons, but also when we think about the way that phosphatidylserine works as a precursor for making acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter for memory. So you think about being wired and tired, we're losing focus, we're having a hard time, we have brain fog, all these different things. So now you can see, okay, well, this is why phosphatidylserine would be in this formulation, because we have to be able to support the brain and the impact that stress has on the brain. And then this has ashwagandha extract. So ashwagandha is an adrenal adaptogenic herb, and what that actually means is it's responding in kind to the way that the adrenal glands are working. So, for example, if the adrenals are overproducing cortisol, it helps to modulate that. If it's under producing cortisol, then it helps to modulate that once again. And these things have been studied, time after time for just how supportive they can be. It's really interesting with phosphatidylserine in particular. They've looked at phosphatidylserine outside of the realm of just memory and, with dementia studies and Alzheimer's studies. They've actually looked at phosphatidylserine in the setting of promoting this stress relief property. And when they give this to people who, normally wouldn't fall into the category of cognitive dysfunction. They did a study actually with golfers, and they found that when they gave them phosphatidylserine, they had more accurate drives. They could hit the ball farther. Now, why is that? Because they weren't as stressed. They weren't getting up, standing in front of the tee and going, oh gosh, I hope I make good contact. It just takes that level. And why? Because we're working once again along that HPA axis. This has DGL licorice in it. So this is all in the adrenal serine formulation. And the DGL licorice, think about all the people who have adrenal stress, chronic fatigue, and they have GI issues. So we know that DGL does a lovely job in terms of supporting and easing discomfort within the GI tract. Packed with all of these nutrients. The glandular, it has the DGL, the ashwagandha, the phosphatidylserine. And we have to make sure that we're utilizing these things. I said if we're having disturbances in our sleep, then we have to address that. So taking things like L-theanine to help to support GABA, which is our calming neurotransmitter, taking melatonin to support a restful night's sleep. And oftentimes people will ask, well, how much melatonin do I need to take? And it really just depends. Everyone is different and unique. So for some people, they may find 3 milligrams of melatonin taken about a half an hour before bed, and they find that that's very, very supportive. For others, they may find it's 6 milligrams, 9 milligrams. It just varies. You know you took too much melatonin if you wake up in the morning and you feel really, really groggy. Then you know, okay, that was too much. It's a simple fix to that. Then you just decrease the amount that you were taking. But if you're utilizing melatonin and it's working for you, then you should wake up and you should feel like you had a restful night's sleep, not like, dragging yourself out of bed, running to your coffee pot to try and get that first cup of coffee in. We should wake up and feel energetic. And when our adrenals are that fatigued, it makes it really hard to do this. And then oftentimes we add insult to injury with the foods that we're eating. So eating bad carbs, bad fats. So adherence to a Mediterranean diet, an anti-inflammatory diet that incorporates high antioxidant foods to fend off oxidative stress, give you those key vitamin, minerals, essential fatty acids to support daily function in the body. I said getting into a regular exercise routine. Doesn't mean you have to go out and join a gym, but find something that you enjoy doing that you can stick with for, half an hour every day. Working on good sleep hygiene. All of these things make a huge difference in how you are feeling. It's amazing to me how many people just try and cope with this. And I've talked to so many people where they say, this is just my life. I'm always on the run. I don't sleep good. I don't eat good. I'm always stressed out, but this is just life. No, it doesn't need to be that way. And you can take these different nutrients. You can take omega-3 every single day. So take fish oil, take vitamin D, taking the adrenal serine formulation. Maybe in the afternoons you feel like you're really starting to drag. Get the rhodiola extract. Take 1 capsule of rhodiola extract in the afternoon when you say, normally around 2-3 o'clock, I really feel like I start to get very sluggish. We know that these nutrients work. We've seen how they work in clinical trials. For me, I know how they work because I've worked with them for so long and I've had so many people who use them and do so well and say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have known about this years ago. Because it's dangerous to have high cortisol levels. Having high cortisol is impacting all of those other systems. So we definitely want to yield the benefit of trying to lower our cortisol. All of these things will make a difference in our immune system, in our cognitive ability, so in our attention and our focus, just in your overall energy. So it's a multi-pronged, multimodal approach. But the consequences of doing nothing is certainly going to lead to havoc in the body. And interestingly enough, even though we talk about the statistics of, 2.5 million Americans, quote unquote, diagnosed with chronic fatigue, we know that 75% of primary care visits in this country are generally going to be related to some form of acute or chronic stress, that people are coming in, and that's one of the things that they're complaining about. I don't feel good. I have no energy. I'm constantly getting sick. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. So we need to know how to address this, and we need to know how to approach it appropriately with the right nutrients. So think about those things: melatonin, fish oil, vitamin D, the Adrenal blended formulation, rhodiola. All of these things that we know have a powerful impact for the many millions of Americans who walk around chronically stressed out. So make sure that you are taking care of yourself. If you know you deal with this, you have a friend, family member, coworker, let them know that there is help. There are things that they can do, simple modifications to diet, exercise, and taking some healthy nutrients can get you back on track. So I want to thank you so much for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health, and we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.